Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Housing and Economic Development Committee. Today is December the 8th. We will begin this meeting with the roll call, posting of the agenda, and the flag salute.
Member Basua?
Here.
Member Flynn?
Present.
Chair Madrigal?
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum, and the agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall kiosk on Wednesday, December 2nd.
Okay, thank you very much. Mayor Flynn, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes. All rise, please. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you.
Moving along, we have public comments on items not on the agenda today, and it looks like we have no public speakers this afternoon.
Well, there is one.
There is one? I'm sorry. It's great.
James
My
Gilmer.
apologies. Oh, I'm sorry. You are correct. James Gilmer. We have one public speaker. Sorry.
Hi, James.
Hello?
Oh, hi. You've got 2 minutes to address.
Hello?
James, do you hear me?
Hello?
Hi, James. Can you hear me?
Who's this?
This is Michelle, the city clerk. You had signed up to speak during the Housing and Economic Development Committee meeting.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
Okay. So you have 2 minutes for items not on the agenda. Your time begins now.
Okay. No problem. Hello, my name is James Gilmer. I sent a letter in to the committee regarding social equity, and I'd like for the committee to consider revisiting the whole issue relative to the fact that admirable decision to have local equity certainly is a beginning, but in proportion to Oxnard being a majority city, less than 18% of the licenses being dedicated to local equity local equity doesn't mean minority, doesn't mean gender, doesn't mean veteran. It just means anybody with residency. So I find that to be minimal. And if you look at other cities' social equity program, it goes beyond just residency. And I think it's a sad commentary for Oxnard just to establish local equity only. So I'm coming back to the committee to see if you can dig deeper to be more culturally congruent for our city in light of the fact that, we're 90% African-American, Latino, Asian Pacific Islander, Native American, and LGBTQI. There are a lot of factors that drive my input today, and I'm hoping that you would take the email that I sent to heart and reconsider this. It's just not my sentiment. It's echoed throughout the community, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that from some of the local equity, racial equity applicants, as well as community residents. If you're going to be focused on war on drugs, disproportionate arrests, minorities, women, veterans, it just behooves the city to take a look at that. You have the one time to do this. You're going to do 16 licenses. There aren't going to be any more retail licenses after
10
this.
seconds.
You pretty much proliferated the cannabis market. And the last thing I would mention is I hope that you would establish a cannabis commission to provide ongoing oversight and to monitor social equity in the city. So thank you very much. I sent the email and a letter and attachment, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you today.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Now we are moving on to item C, our consent agenda, and it's the approval of minutes for the November 24th meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
Call for a vote.
Member Basua,
Yes.
Member Flynn,
Aye.
Chair Madrigal.
Aye.
The motion to approve carries 3-0.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving along, we have item D, we have reports. The first report this afternoon is from the Housing Department of review of tenant protection strategies. And this will be presented by Mr. Emilio Ramirez.
Good. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, or members of the Housing and Economic Development Committee. Is it up? Yes. So this is Emilio Ramirez, Housing Director. We are before you to consider new proposals for creation of new tenant protection programs and in consideration of an item that was presented before the City Council in September. So in September of this year, the Central Coast Alliance United for Sustainable Community, or CAUSE, as they are known, presented a need for renter protection policies during open public comment of City Council meeting in early September. Several community members at that time expressed concerns about rising rents and the cost of living in Oxnard. They expressed a support for a potential enactment of a local rent control measure. And that conversation that was launched at that time is the basis of this presentation and of hopeful future conversation. If you go to the next slide. The CAUSE published a report called Housing Crisis in 805, and in it, it described the need for the measure, the initiative, the conversation that was launched at that public comment period in September. I think that that need is clear, described on the slide in front of you, but as in their report, and as we all know, the median household in Oxnard simply cannot afford the median home price or the prevailing rent in Oxnard. As you can see on screen, that median household is earning $68,000, where the affordability rate is largely defined to be 35% of the monthly income, or $1,991. The median home price $645,000, and the prevailing rent $2,300. Clearly, that median income, that median household is not sufficient to support the cost of living either in that prevailing rent or to purchase that median home that is identified. Additionally, the unavailability of housing stock is creating other conditions of substandard living throughout Oxnard, and especially where the lower income populations tend to concentrate. And those other conditions include simply the condition of housing to an overcrowding condition within the same housing unit. Next slide, please. So the city does operate a rent stabilization ordinance and program, but it is limited to mobile homes that are set within mobile home parks. And the housing department does administer that program for the benefit of those homeowners that are also tenants, where they own the home, but they're paying space rent in a park. The housing department considers applications for rent increases. It considers utility cost apportionment, and it is paid for entirely by appropriations or fees that are paid for by the park owners as well as the actual homeowners themselves. So while there is a program and there is the potential to add to it after discussion today and in the future, we would need to figure out how to implement and how to adopt the cost necessaries to implement that. Next slide, please. So by way of background, in 1995, California adopted the Costa Hawkins Rental Housing Act. it was adopted primarily for the benefit of landlords, not for the benefit of the renters or the tenants or the residents. It essentially prohibited the establishment of new rent control ordinances that would control rents for single family homes, for condominiums, and for any apartments that were built after the passage of that law or in 1995. So those deemed to be new apartment complexes could not be subject to rent control after Costa Hawkins. It also prohibited what it refers to as vacancy control. Vacancy control is the scenario by which when a person moves out and there is a vacant unit, that the next tenant that would pay, they could pay any rent that the landlord establishes because it is outside of the control of any rent control ordinance because it is vacant. So that vacancy control is also limited or prohibited by Costa Hawkins. Next slide, please. But in 2020 and the election that just occurred last month, the California voters considered Proposition 21 or Rent Affordability Act. Proposition 21 proposed to modify three main limitations to Costa Hawkins. And the primary one was that it would have empowered or re-empowered anyways, a local jurisdiction such as the city of Oxnard to consider a new rent control ordinance, specifically rent control for units that are not more than 15 years old. It also allowed for a method of increasing rents over a period of time. But Proposition 21 failed, and it was not enacted. So at the last election that occurred last month, it failed the California voters. Next slide, please. However, the state legislature did enact AB 1482, or the Tenant Protection Act. That Tenant Protection Act became effective on January 2020. And the Tenant Protection Act imposes a form of rent control statewide. It limits the ability to raise rents to not more than 5% plus the CPI, where at optimum maximum is 10%. It only allows you to increase rent 2 times per a 12-month period. You have to give notice to the residents that you're going to increase rent, and it also maintains that it does not permit vacancy control. So vacancy control limit is still in place. But that Tenant Protection Act is a form of rent control. It is in place now, and it is effective statewide, including within the city of Oxnard. Next slide, please. But the Tenant Protection Act, or Assembly Bill 1482, does not apply to some housing units. Namely, to be more consistent with the Costa Hawkins Act, it does not apply to apartment complexes that are new. In this case, defined to be newer than 15 years old, okay? As opposed to in 1995 when Costa Hawkins was enacted. So if the apartment complex is older than 15 years, then AB 1482 would apply. But it also doesn't apply to the same units that Costa Hawkins limited to, which they named as separately alienable. In other words, single family homes or a condominium. Also, nonprofit hospitals, student dorms, short-term rentals are not do not apply to 1482. Next slide, please. But there is a significant provision within 1482, and that is that it imposes a limitation of evictions based on no fault evictions. So if you have a just cause to evict, i.e. a person didn't pay rent or something like that, then the landlord is eligible to evict under the normal standard. But if there is a no fault eviction, such as the landlord wants to move into the unit themselves, or they want to withdraw it from the rental housing stock per the Ellis Act, or they want to do something in a way that removes it from the stock, i.e. demolishes the unit and builds something else, then 1482 requires a process in order to cause for the termination of that tenancy or that residency as a result of this no-fault eviction. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. So go back to the previous slide, please. So the process for the no-fault eviction is that you have to give the tenant advance notice, and you have to provide relocation benefits. That relocation benefits is defined to be at least 1 month's worth of rent. That relocation benefit can be in the form of cash payment. It can be in the form of rental deferral. In other words, for the last month that you're in the unit, then you can abate that rent in an effort to provide for that relocation. So those are protections that are offered to the tenant if the eviction or the tenancy is going to be terminated as per a no-fault eviction. Those two things are the primary purposes of AB 1482. So next slide, please. But the Costa Hawkins Act did not outright limit the ability to create a local rent control ordinance, or for that matter, the statewide AB 1482 ordinance that the legislature enacted. The local cities clearly cannot violate Costa Hawkins because it is still in effect. And what that means is that it cannot impose rent control on units that are new. Costa Hawkins defines it as after 1995. Despite that, the Tenant Protection Act defines it as older than 15 years. So there's a difference, but Costa Hawkins defines it after 1995. It also does not allow you to impose rent control on single-family homes or condominiums, and it also does not allow you to establish a vacancy control on a local ordinance. But Costa Hawkins does not limit the ability of a local jurisdiction to otherwise impose a rent control ordinance in a local municipality such as the city of Oxnard. So we would be empowered to establish a local measure that could control rent, if you will, for units that are older than 1995. There is a significant stock in Oxnard that is older than 1995. As long as we don't impose such a control on single-family homes, condominiums, and as long as that new ordinance does not impose a vacancy control. There's a myriad of examples that I received from staff at Costa, thank you for their help, that have done just that. After 1995, imposed a new ordinance under the limitations of Costa Hawkins. Next slide, please. So in reviewing the effort that was brought forth by CAUS and the assignment that I received from the city manager to engage in this conversation with CAUS and the community, I started to think about potential alternatives. Number one, clearly a rent control ordinance that is in consistency with Costa Hawkins is something that we could consider and we should discuss. But also in support of of AB 1482, we could easily create a program or contract for a program to be created in order to enforce the rights afforded to the tenants by 1482, because 1482 requires private enforcement. In other words, you as the tenant has to sue in order to cause enforcement of 1482. So we could create a program by which we are providing legal assistance or housing rights advocacy or something like that, and maybe marry it with our current rent control, rent stabilization ordinance that we have for mobile homes. Something that we could undertake. We don't have budget for that, so we would have to figure out how to do that. But also pursue a diminishing of the gap between what it costs to live in Oxnard and what people make. So maybe a program that develops jobs or wages consistent with the pipeline program that the city manager is already engaged on to pursue an increase in income, which has been stagnant for some time while rents are increasing, that's a possibility that we could undertake, not necessarily rent control, but could affect the gap in housing costs. And for that matter, just developing a more affordable housing, which we are active in right now. So all of those things, including a potential new rent control ordinance, is something that is possible. Not sure how likely or probable it could be given budget and resources and et cetera. Next slide, please. But what staff is proposing is to seek your direction to review the potential creation of a program that provides for the empowerment of our community and their own advocacy of their own rights afforded to them by AB 1482, whether that's a program that we contract with Housing Rights Center or a local law firm or a nonprofit or a cause for that matter. I did ask them if they would consider it. Some program that allows us to empower our residents to seek the protection that is afforded to them in 1482. And further, to continue engagement with cause and community stakeholders as we consider the rent control ordinance or other programs that CAUSE first introduced to the City Council during open comment a couple of months ago, and then return to Housing and Economic Development Committee in a couple of months from now, maybe April or so, after we have had an opportunity to consider how to structure these programs, how to budget for those programs, how to operate them, consider rent control ordinance or something along those lines, and consider a full engagement with the community and cause and all the stakeholders, and then return to the committee with a discussion of what we found in the next few months, and then a proposal for consideration by City Council. Next slide, please. So at my initial review, and admittedly not complete, in order to complete the job, I think I need a significant amount of more conversation with cause and staff and advocates and landlords and tenants and residents and many others, and research what other jurisdictions are doing in furtherance of AB 1482. I would ask for leave to return to the Housing Economic Development Committee maybe April or May, after having had that more complete engagement and consideration with a proposal at that time. But I do think that there is enough in 1482 and enough in local engagement for us to provide for further empowerment, maybe a local ordinance, maybe a local ordinance that's not only rent control, or maybe instead of landlord or living wage or something along those lines. Is something that we might be able to research and return to Housing and Economic Development. So that's my presentation. I know that there is quite a bit of public comment in regard to this, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Ramirez. We do have quite a few speakers, so we will begin. Our first speaker we have is Zuleth Lucero, to be followed by Maria Navarro.
Hi, Zuleth, you have 3 minutes. Please begin now.
Hi, thank you. Hi, good afternoon. I want to thank Emilio for recognizing our work and presenting today. My name is Zuleth Lucero, and I'm a community organizer with CAUSE. As I mentioned in previous meetings, as an organizer, I often receive calls and messages from people in our community about their rent being too high and not being able to make needs end. Many people in our community have lost hours due to the pandemic, and this has created an even greater economic burden since they cannot keep up with their monthly payments, including their rent. It even surprises me of how much people pay for rent in Oxnard when I know how much they make a month. Other cities in California have adopted rent control, so I believe we can do the same for Oxnard. Many families will benefit from it, and they will be able to protect our working families. Once again, I ask you to make homes more affordable for our families in Oxnard, and thank you again for presenting today.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Maria Navarro, to be followed by Cecilia.
Hi, Maria. You have 3 minutes to address the committee. Please begin now.
All right, thank you. Hi, members of the committee, and thank you, Emilio, and thank you, all of you, for being so receptive to our community leaders and to us as well. I am a policy advocate with Costa, and I urge you all to look at the reality of people in Oxnard. So under the current rent control legislation, which is the Tenant Protection Act, it is legal for a landlord to raise rent at 5% plus CPI, like Amelia said, right? Last year in Oxnard, this totaled 8.3%. Now, this number may sound reasonable, but last year, now this number may sound reasonable, but these numbers, let's see how that looks like, right? For someone who earns $15 an hour in Oxnard. So let's imagine that a worker that earns $15 an hour rents out a 2-bedroom apartment at the average market price of $2,340 a month. Under the protection afforded by the Tenant Protection Act, a tenant would see her rent increase $194.22 per month for the next 12 months, bringing up the rent to $2,500 per month. So the estimated monthly income for this person who's working $15 an hour is $2,400 without deducting taxes. So rent would basically take up 100 to 110% of that income. Now, I am an immigrant from Colombia. My parents immigrated to South Oxnard in 2003, and they were able to get working class jobs when they came here. And growing up, money was always tight. My mom's income would go almost entirely to rent. And when my dad didn't have a job, we were forced to take out loans and max out credit cards to pay for our basic needs. It really wasn't until my brother and I started working that my parents were able to even have more than $700 in their bank account. So many people in Oxnard are like my parents. You know, we barely make it month to month with little savings. The kind of sudden rent increase that we see at $150 or $200, which are legal under state law, is beyond what we can afford as Oxnard residents. And it's enough to push many of our families out of our homes, out of our city, or onto our streets. We need our city to pass stronger rent protections than what the state affords. And just like also as an aside, now in the times of the pandemic, having people be out of a home, out of a protection of their homes and being thrown in the street is not necessarily good. It's going to be a health crisis. And so hopefully y'all take this consideration for rent control to your hearts so that we may be able to do something with the city and be able to promote our like actual living conditions for our families. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker we have is Cecilia, to be followed by Teresa.
Uh-oh. Cecilia?
Bueno, ¿sí?
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Are you able to speak in English or do you need translation?
Español.
Okay. Emilio, would you be able to assist with that?
Sure, I can assist.
Okay, can you let her know that she should go, like, say a little bit at a time and then you can, translate for her? And then she'll have 6 minutes since we have to kind of do, a little extra. Okay?
Sure. Señora Emilio Ramírez, voy a traducir para usted. Déjeme un tiempo después de que hable para traducir, ¿ok?
Sí, está bien.
Okay, go ahead.
¿Ya empiezo?
Sí.
Hola, buenas tardes, miembros del Consejo de Oxnard. Mi nombre es Cecilia y soy trabajadora del campo.
Hello, good afternoon, members of the committee of the city of Oxnard. My name is Cecilia and I am a farmer.
Estoy aquí para pedirle que se implemente un control de renta en Oxnard.
I am here to ask that a rent control ordinance be implemented in Oxnard.
Yo pago un poco más de 1,500 de renta al mes. Pago más de lo que yo gano y eso no es todo. Y eso no es todo. ¿Sabe usted qué pasaría si me lo suben los próximos meses?
Espera
Si
un
me
momento.
suben la renta los próximos meses.
Espera un momento, por favor. I pay $1,500 a month in rent, which is more than I make, and that is not all. If you can imagine what the impact on rent increase in the next 2 months would be. Sígala, señora.
Tendría que pedir dinero prestado o sacar un préstamo para que no nos saquen.
I would have to ask for money borrowed or take out a loan so that we are not evicted.
Pero seguiría endeudando y no tendría dinero para pagar préstamos.
But I would be in debt and I would not have money to pay the loans.
Yo no he trabajado tiempo completo desde que empezó la pandemia y tengo miedo que me suban la renta, ya que no hay un control estable.
I have not worked full time since the beginning of the pandemic, and I am afraid that my rent will increase and I will be evicted.
La renta a mí me ha estado subiendo hasta 2 veces por año sin ningún motivo.
The rent has been going up for me at least twice a year without any motive.
Yo he vivido en el mismo lugar por más de 18 años. Solo una vez me han cambiado la alfombra. Otros arreglos los tengo que hacer yo.
I have lived in the same unit for 18 years, and only one time have they replaced the carpet, and other improvements I had to do myself.
Si no me suben la renta, no me puedo mudar a otro lugar porque todo está muy caro y no hay dónde. Aquí en Oxnard hay una crisis de vivienda en nuestra comunidad, en nuestra ciudad.
Despite the rent increase, I cannot move to somewhere else because the cost of living in other places is expensive. They're just the cost of living in Oxnard is expensive.
Estoy aquí para volverle a pedir que se discuta un control de renta. Nosotros, los residentes de Oxnard, no podemos esperar más tiempo. Gracias.
I'm here to ask once again that a rent control ordinance be considered in Oxnard because we cannot afford more rent.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker we have is Teresa, to be followed by Ana.
And she's also going to need translation, Emilio. If you could just
Okay.
answer it. When you see the phone icon come up in the gallery of the names.
What's her name again?
Teresa.
Teresa.
Right. Buenas tardes, señora Teresa.
No, ya me llamaron, soy Cecilia.
Make sure you call Cecilia again. Disculpa, señora, vamos a colgar, ¿ok?
Sí, está bien, gracias.
It's like it went to voicemail.
Okay. Should we move on to Anna then?
Sure.
Okay, we have Ana to be followed by Lucila.
Okay. And she's also going to need translation.
Buenas tardes, señora.
Go ahead, Emilio.
Buenas tardes, señora
Buenas
Ana.
tardes. Sí, buenas tardes.
Habla Emilio Ramírez desde la reunión del Comité de Viviendas del concejal de la ciudad de Oxnard. Usted habló para el control de renta.
Sí,
Ok. Le vamos a dar 3 minutos para presentar, para lo que quiera presentar. Yo le voy a traducir. Así es que con la traducción y con usted van a ser 6 minutos en total, ¿ok?
ok.
Sígale.
Okay. Hola, mi nombre es María.
Hello, my name is Maria.
Soy una líder comunitaria con causa.
I'm a community leader with Cause.
Estoy haciendo este llamado porque a muchas personas en nuestra comunidad
I'm on this call because for many people in our community,
les han estado subiendo la renta desde hace tiempo
have been seeing the rent increase for quite some time.
y no es justo que ahora que muchos de nosotros no estamos trabajando de tiempo completo,
And it is not just that during a time when a lot of us are not working full time,
debido al virus, nos sigan subiendo la renta.
because of COVID-19, the rent continues to increase.
Ahora yo estoy pagando 1,138
At this point, I'm paying $1,138,
y esto es mucho para mí, ya que lo que gano no es suficiente.
which is a lot for me since what I earn is not sufficient.
Además, ahora durante la pandemia nos han estado reduciendo horas de trabajo.
Additionally, during the pandemic, my hours have been reduced.
También soy trabajadora del campo y madre soltera y lo que gano no es mucho para mí.
I'm also a farm worker and a single mother, and my income is not sufficient for me.
El temor que tengo es que algún día no pueda yo pagar la renta y quede sin hogar para mis hijos y para mí.
My fear is that one day I will not be able to pay the rent and I will be left without a home for my children and myself.
Es por eso que ahora pido y exijo que desarrollen un plan de renta para que todos nosotros podamos vivir de acuerdo a nuestros ingresos sin temor a que un día nos desalojen.
Which is why today I'm asking and I'm urging that you consider a new plan for rent in protection of our community household.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Lucila to be followed by Adriana.
And same thing this time, Emilio.
Okay. Buenas tardes, señora Lucila.
Sí, buenas tardes.
Habla Emilio Ramírez de la ciudad de Oxnard. Usted pidió hablar con el comité de viviendas del concejal.
Sí,
Estamos ahorita en la parte de la agenda acerca de la renta, así es que sígale, señora, por favor.
ok. Hola, mi nombre es Lucila, soy un líder de comunitaria con causa. Ahorita yo no estoy trabajando, pago 1,500 $200 de renta por un departamento de una recámara.
Señora,
Quizás a usted, no sé.
señora, déjeme traducir, por favor, ¿ok?
Ok.
Hi, my name is Lucilia. I am a farm worker in Oxnard, earning, I believe she said $1,500 a month in rent, and I'm seeking assistance in rent control.
Quizás a usted no se le haga mucho dinero, pero para mí sí lo es, porque soy una campesina y madre soltera.
Maybe for you, it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but for me it is, because I am a farm worker and a single mother.
Que vivo al día. Ahorita no estoy trabajando todos los días por la pandemia. Es muy difícil cada mes porque sé que tengo que pagar la renta y se me hace mucho dinero.
That lives day by day, and my employment is not fixed because of the pandemic, and every day the cost or the bills increase, and it's overwhelming for me.
Me va a subir la renta en los próximos meses porque la suben cada año. Me preocupa mucho que no vaya a tener dinero para poder pagar, y esta situación la estamos viviendo muchas personas de Oxnard.
The rent is going to increase in the next couple of months because it does so every year. And I am worried that we will not be able to keep up. And this situation is the same for many families in Oxnard.
No es justo que constantemente estamos viviendo preocupados de qué va a pasar al final del mes. Pagamos más de dinero en renta de lo que ganamos nosotros, las familias trabajadoras de Oxnard.
It's not just that every month we have to be worried about what's going to happen at the end of the month. If we pay more in rent than what we make, and it's not just for the hardworking families of Oxnard.
Estamos viviendo una crisis de vivienda. Espero que pronto se haga un plan para un control de renta para que pueda haber viviendas accesibles para nosotros. Y gracias.
We are in a housing crisis, and I expect that a rent control program will be considered for us hardworking families in Oxnard. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Adriana, to be followed by Soledad.
Elio, same thing.
Okay. Buenas tardes, señora Adriana.
Sí, buenas tardes.
Habla Emilio Ramírez de la ciudad de Oxnard. Está con la reunión del comité de viviendas del concejal. Tiene 6 minutos, yo le voy a traducir, por favor, déme una pausa para que le pueda pasar lo que digo.
Ok.
Sígale, por favor. Señora.
Sí, hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Adriana.
Hi, my name is Adriana.
Soy líder comunitaria con Causa. Yo soy residente de Oxnard.
Señora.
Y también soy campesina. Ahorita estoy pagando $1,050 por una unidad.
And I am also a farm worker, and I am paying $1,050 for one unit.
Es solo un cuarto con una pequeña cocina y baño.
Just a one bedroom with one small kitchen and bathroom.
Desde que comenzó la pandemia, me han estado reduciendo horas del trabajo.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, I have been receiving a reduction of work hours at my employment.
Y quizás a usted no se le haga mucho dinero lo que estamos pagando, pero para nosotros sí.
And perhaps for you, doesn't sound like a lot of money what we are paying, but for us it is.
No estamos trabajando tiempo completo y tenemos gastos, nuestros ahorros de emergencia.
We are not working full time, and we have to also cover the cost of living and emergency costs that come up.
Para poder pagar la renta, ahorita estamos preocupados de que nos suban la renta.
In order to pay for the rent, right now we are worried that the rent is going to increase
Porque nos la suben cada año.
because it increases every year.
La verdad que estamos pagando más de lo que ganamos cada mes. Es muy difícil para mí y para mi familia.
The truth is that we're paying more than we make every year, every month, and it's very difficult for me and my family.
Es por eso que estamos aquí para pedirles que consideren un plan
Which is why we're here, so that we can ask for you to consider a plan
que estabilice la renta para proteger a todas las familias trabajadoras.
to stabilize the rent and protection of all the hardworking families.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Soledad to be followed by Arturo.
Okay, it went to voicemail.
Next, we have Arturo to be followed by Yesenia Ponce.
Go ahead, Emilio.
Buenas tardes, Arturo.
Buenas tardes.
Habla Emilio Ramírez de la ciudad de Oxnard. Usted está con la reunión del Comité de Viviendas del Concejal. Estamos en el tema de renta y pidió un tiempo para hablar con el comité. Yo le voy a traducir. Le vamos a dar 6 minutos y necesito que usted me dé momento para traducir mientras de que está discutiendo, ¿ok?
Está bien.
Ok, sígale, señor.
Hola, buenas noches, miembros del Consejo.
Hello, good evening, members of the committee.
Mi nombre es Arturo y soy residente de Oxnard.
My name is Arturo and I am a resident of Oxnard.
Yo he experimentado muchas regulaciones en lugares donde he estado rentando.
I have experienced many irregularities in places that I have been renting.
No sabía que tenía derechos como rentero y hubo veces que yo y mi familia tuvimos que vivir en malas condiciones.
I didn't know that I had rights as a tenant, and there were times when me and my family had to live in substandard conditions.
Hasta que nos pudimos mudar a un lugar mejor, pero ahora estoy pagando mucha renta y tengo miedo de que me suban la renta.
Until I was able to move to a better place, a better conditioned place, but now I'm paying a significant amount in rent, and I'm afraid it's going to increase.
Tengo miedo que me suban la renta, ya que no tendríamos a dónde mudarnos. No es justo que tengamos que estar preocupados por la pandemia y por la renta.
I'm afraid that the rent is going to increase and that we will not have a place to move to. It is not right that we should be worried about both the pandemic and the rent.
La renta sigue subiendo ya que no hay un control estable.
The rent continues to increase now that there is not a rent control stable.
Y ha estado subiendo mucho en los últimos años.
It has been increasing significant in the past years.
Por eso, hoy yo le pido que añadan el tema de control de renta en su próxima agenda.
Which is why today I ask that you add the subject of rent control at the next agenda.
Ya no podemos esperar más tiempo. Muchas gracias.
We cannot wait too much longer. Thank you much.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Yesenia Ponce, to be followed by Yesenia Gonzalez.
This speaker does not need translation. Okay, it's gone to voicemail.
Okay, next we have Yesenia Gonzalez, to be followed by Victorina.
Hi, Yesenia. You have 3 minutes to address the committee. Please begin.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Yesenia Gonzalez. I am a youth leader with Costa. First of all, thank you to the City Council for paying attention to the issue. We are asking for your help to begin a discussion of rent control in Oxnard now rather than later. We need our city leaders to start the discussion of rent control in Oxnard as soon as possible for many of our families are struggling. We don't have any time to lose. I see more and more families struggling to get by, and this pandemic has shown us just how much families struggle to pay rent. With low-paying jobs and kids to feed, we find it harder to keep up with the rising rent. I don't want to see my mother coming home from work covered in dirt just to be able to pay for this month's rent. And I also don't want to see other families having to live with their other family members in a single apartment. And with them having Zoom calls over meeting, it's really hard for the kids to pay attention when their siblings are in the same room as them. This is why today I ask to please put a discussion of rent control on the next meeting agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Victorina, to be followed by Olga.
Emilio, she will need translation.
Okay. Aló, buenas tardes, señora Victorina.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Está con el comité de viviendas con el concejal de Oxnard. Le vamos a dar 6 minutos para introducir lo que quiere hablar. Yo voy a traducir, así es que por favor déjeme un tiempo para traducir, ¿ok?
Sí.
Ok, adelante, por favor.
Hola, mi nombre es Victorina. Soy
Hi, my name
líder
is-
comunitaria con causa. Yo soy residente de Oxnard y trabajadora del campo.
Hi, my name is Victorina. I am a resident of Oxnard, a farm worker, and a leader with cause.
Al momento yo estoy pagando 1,500 por un departamento de un cuarto, pero no es suficientemente grande para mi familia,
At the
pero es
moment,
lo más económico que hay.
At the moment, I'm paying $1,500 a month in rent for an apartment unit of one room, but it is not sufficient space for my family, but it is the most economical that I could find.
Yo no estoy trabajando a tiempo completo por la pandemia, pero sé que eso no se puede controlar. Hace unos meses me subieron la renta y sé que en unos meses más van a subir más.
I am not working full time because of the pandemic, but I know that that's not something that we can control. A few months ago, they raised my rent, and I know that in a few months from now, they're going to raise it again.
Pero sé que ustedes, los representantes de Oxnard, pueden hacer algo por nosotros. Si estoy haciendo este comentario es porque realmente estamos pasando por una situación muy difícil.
But I know that you are able to do, as members, as the council of the city of Oxnard, are able to do something for us renters in the city of Oxnard. And if I'm speaking, it's because we are in need of your help.
Les pido que pronto desarrollen un plan para el control de renta, para que todas las personas que viven en Oxnard vamos a estar protegidos. Gracias.
I ask that you develop a plan for rent control in Oxnard so that the renters in Oxnard can be protected. Thank you.
Gracias.
Okay. Thank you. We have, oh great, I lost my place. Is it Olga next and then Noemi?
Yes.
All right, perfect.
And translation, please.
Buenas tardes, señora Olga.
Sí. Buenas tardes.
Está con el comité de viviendas del concejal acerca del tema de renta. Yo la voy a traducir, así es que le pido un momento para traducir mientras de los minutos. Así que adelante, señora.
Ok, está bien. Hola, mi nombre es Olga. Soy líder comunitario con causa.
Hi, my name is Olga, and I'm a community leader with cause.
Hoy le quería comentar mi situación actual. Yo estoy pagando 1,300
I wanted to express my current condition. I am paying $1,300
de renta y pues quizás a usted no se le haga mucho dinero,
for rent, and perhaps for you that does not seem like a lot of money,
pero sí lo es para mí y mi familia.
but it is for me and my family.
Me redujeron horas de trabajo por la pandemia y me tuve que quedar en casa.
They reduced hours of work because of the pandemic, and I had to stay in home.
A nosotros se nos ha hecho muy difícil completar el dinero de la renta.
For us, it has been very difficult to assemble the rent due.
Y sé que en unos cuantos meses nos van a aumentar la renta.
And we know that in a few months, they're going to increase the rent.
Porque nos suben la renta cada año sin ninguna justificación.
Because they raise the rent every year without any justification.
Por eso hoy le pido que desarrollen un plan pronto
Which is why today I ask that you develop a plan quickly
y que ponga en su agenda el tema del control de renta.
and then you agendize you agendize rent control
Para que todos nosotros,
so that all of us,
las personas de Oxnard, estemos protegidos. Muchas gracias.
the people of Oxnard, can be protected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Noemi to be followed by Teresa.
Hi, Noemi. You have 3 minutes. Please begin. Noemi?
Yes.
Hi. You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Can you repeat again? Sorry.
You signed up to speak for the Housing and Economic Committee meeting, the tenant strategies item.
Okay. Hello, my name is Noemi. I am a youth leader with Costa. Today, I want to share with you one of the issues that many people have in our community. Many people cannot pay their rent because it's very expensive, and the rent has been rising since the pandemic started. It's not fair that hardworking people who have lost hours due to COVID-19, like my mom, who has to deal with their landlords raising their rent. This is the reality of many families in Oxnard. This is why today I am asking you to make Oxnard affordable for working families. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Teresa and Yesenia Ponce.
And Emilio, if it goes through this time, she'll need translation.
Okay.
Bueno. Bueno.
Buenas tardes, Teresa. Habla Emilio Ramírez de la ciudad de Oxnard. Está con la reunión del Comité de Viviendas.
Ajá.
¿Le puede apagar la televisión, por favor?
Sí.
Usted pidió hablar testimonio con el tema de renta. Yo la voy a traducir. Le pido que me dé un momento para traducir mientras que está presentando, ¿ok?
Ok, está bien.
Adelante, por favor.
Hola, buenas tardes, miembros del consejo. Mi nombre es Teresa. Yo soy líder comunitaria de Causa y soy trabajadora del campo aquí en la ciudad de Oxnard.
Hello, members of the committee. My name is Teresa. I am a community leader with Cause, a farm worker, and a resident of the community of Oxnard.
Me han reducido horas de trabajo por la pandemia. Yo no califico para aplicar para asistencia monetaria.
And they have reduced my hours of work because of the pandemic. I do not qualify to apply for monetary assistance.
Y por eso estoy preocupada porque si me suben la renta no tendría dinero para pagar. A mí me subieron la renta hace unos meses.
And that is why I'm worried, because if they increase my rent, I would not have money to pay. For me, they raised my rent.
Y me han estado subiendo la renta 3 veces por año. Ahorita estoy pagando casi 2,000 al mes de lo que gano. No me gusta que tenga que pedir dinero prestado, pero lo hago porque no quiero que me corran.
And I'm worried that I won't be able to cover the rent. For me, they have raised my rent 3 times a year. I pay almost $2,000 a month, and I cannot afford that. I don't like to ask for money borrowed, but I feel like I have to in order to.
A mí y a mis hijos y las familias trabajadoras de Oxnard estamos pasando por una crisis de vivienda.
For me and my children and the residents of the community of Costa, we are in crisis.
Es una realidad que a veces no quieren ver nuestras historias, que no son reales, y nosotros y las familias trabajadoras de Oxnard no podemos seguir viviendo con el miedo.
It is a reality that sometimes you don't want to acknowledge our reality, but it's something that my family members.
De miedo que nos desalojen. Gracias.
We're afraid of eviction.
Que no son reales, y nosotros y las familias trabajadoras de Oxnard no podemos seguir viviendo con el miedo.
Okay, thank you. Our last speaker is Yesenia Ponce.
Hi, Yesenia, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Good afternoon and greetings, City Council and City Manager. My name is Yesenia. I'm a COS youth leader from Oxnard. I'm here asking for your help to begin a discussion of rent control in Oxnard now rather than later. We need our city leader to start the discussion of rent control in Oxnard as soon as possible. Our city is mainly based of low income and farm working families. It is too expensive to pay a new apartment here in Oxnard. Due to this, we have 3 or more families living in one apartment. I personally experienced this myself. I've lived in a household with 10 or 15 people. This is why I ask you today to please put a discussion of rent control on the next meeting agenda. Thank you for your time.
That's all the speakers, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We are going to move on. Mayor Flynn, anything to say?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I actually have a lot to say, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this issue. I listened intently at the voices of the people, in particular farm workers, and part of their plight and the burden that they have, especially during this pandemic, is how to make ends meet when they're already at a very low income level. And I spent a good part of my time, this is my last committee meeting, I spent a good part of my council career, 14 years, trying to get a initiative passed that would protect, in particular, farm workers. It's not exclusive to them, but would protect them from abusive landlords, people that are ethically challenged, substandard housing and living conditions. And what came out of that 12-year effort was the Safe Homes, Safe Families program. And although I do not think it is as robust as it could and should be, at least that is a step forward in a positive direction. The challenge that we have in this community is that, from my estimation, and working on this, Mr. Chair and Committee Member Basua, is that Oxnard has approximately 1/3, let's just take farm worker housing, which I'm a big advocate of. Oxnard has approximately 1/3 of all the land in the county, farmable land, attributed to its sphere of influence. Yet we're housing 75 to 85% of all the farm workers in the county. And it's my contention that other cities in the Western County and even the East County, they should be providing these solutions. And it's going to take a lot of strong leadership to get them to do that. But I believe that Oxnard has a moral and an ethical obligation to house its workers. We do not have a moral and ethical obligation to house all the county's working poor. And the people we just heard from, Mr. Chair, are barely making ends meet. My heart goes out to them. And I will be first and foremost and raise my hand and say I've never lived in the circumstances that they find themselves in. On my last committee meeting here, it pains me to think about what they have to go through, and it's just a lot. The subject at hand is rent control, and we know that part of the answer to affordability and part of the answer to decent first world American housing conditions is supply. Supply is part of the answer. And I've raised the issue about whether supply can ever keep up with demand. But supply is very important. If we go beyond, I would contend, if we go beyond the state of California with rent control or any suggestion of rent control, it's my contention that the number one affordable housing producer in the county, and probably one of the top affordable housing producers in the state of California, is no longer going to find enough developers. Sure, they're going to be nonprofits that will always continue to do that. And Chodos, right, are going to continue to do that. Mercy Housing, Cabrillo Economic Development Corporation, they'll step up. There's no question about nonprofit housing. And, we're going to be moving on other ventures. But a lot of the housing that we expect to build is going to come from the private sector. And if we're thinking that a way to entice more housing production is by rent control, I would suggest that that runs in the face of a classic economics of supply and demand. And again, I understand that demand far exceeds supply, but the bottom line is this: we need to produce more housing, not less housing. And we also need our neighboring cities, Ventura, Camarillo, Ojai, Santa Paula, Fillmore, and other cities to step up to the plate and start building housing to the extent that Oxnard is building housing. Mr. Chair, I cannot support, beyond the 10-year rule that was recently just put into place, I cannot support rent control in this city when in fact we need to entice more developers and more individuals with capital to build more housing to alleviate the housing crisis in this city. I believe, and I would contend, that going beyond the state requirement is going to be a major disincentive. It'll be, even if we think building this housing is difficult now, just look at what's going to happen if we impose further burdens on those developers. And right now, we're looking, Mr. Chair, to increase, not decrease, the amount of money that a developer has to pay for an in lieu of fee, which right now is ridiculously low. We're looking for developers to pay more money into an in lieu of fee pot so that we can build more housing. So to ask for that and to have rent control at the same time is not an economic development strategy, nor a housing strategy that I can support. And I'm very sorry, Mr. Chair, because I know that that their intentions and their membership is very committed to the very people that we heard from. I don't question their authenticity and their motives one bit. I applaud them and laud them for what that they're trying to do. But I think that the city needs to focus on job training, as it's already suggested in the report. We need to continue to be a leader in providing for affordable housing. We need to continue to engage cause and a partnership where we're finding a way to produce more first world. And when I say first world, this is United States of America, people should not be living in substandard housing in this great nation of ours. And what I've seen in South Winds and what I've seen, Mr. Chair, in other parts of this city is absolutely unacceptable. And I see no way that increasing the burden is going to alleviate this crisis. So those are my final words, Mr. Chair, on this issue.
Thank you, Mayor. My 2 cents or my comments on this regarding rent control and everything that was presented today. I understand everything going on. Unlike the mayor stated, I grew up substandard housing. I understand the concept of, fighting for a parking spot. I understand the concept of, multiple family living. I understand the fact that, when I was born, my parents' apartment down in the Fremont North neighborhood was robbed 3 times before I turned 1. And, we had to move. I understand, living with my uncles and my parents in a 1-bedroom apartment on Hill Street. And I've seen the plight of not only myself, but of others. Growing up like that, you are grateful for what you have, and you are grateful that, your situation sometimes is better than others. Your heart goes out for others that, have it worse. So, not having much, you're grateful for what you have. At the same time, this isn't only a South Oxnard issue. This is an issue citywide. There's many different areas throughout the city where, yes, there is standard housing. There's substandard living. The argument in not only this past election, but the election before about some sort of rent control always comes up that, if rent control is brought up, then, the landowners would not have the capital or money to fix up the apartments. So the apartments would stay as substandard housing. Those people who live in the quote unquote substandard housing have been arguing for years that no matter what, their apartment complex never gets fixed up. I've been to many neighborhood meetings where, I get the comment. The only thing they've ever done, as one of the speakers said, was change my carpet once over the last 20 years. So, you do get that concept. And as always, with everything that is put on the table, I know other cities have some sort of rent control. I'm not necessarily saying that, we need to go in that particular direction, but, we need to see what, other cities are doing, what they are not doing. And, we need to see like all pros and cons. I think simply put, whatever this committee ends up proposing, I just feel that then the council is just going to kick it back. So we need to make sure that all options are on the table. And not necessarily maybe, I understand it's going to be a lot of work. I understand that we may not necessarily go in any particular direction, but all cards need to be put on the table. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There is no clear-cut answer as to, what the housing situation is going to look like, 12 months down the road, 6 months down the road. For all intents and purposes, this might be the beginning of a humongous crisis. So we need to have all cards put on the table, see what our options are, see, pros and cons from other cities, pros and cons to anything that we do. I do understand that, having rent control is going to alienate some of landowners. As far as developers, though, I don't think that they would be put in that particular type of situation one way or the other. my item would just be to kind of put all cards on the table and see, what we end up deciding.
Chair Madrigal, with those comments, I asked Michelle to bring up slide 11, which was some of the alternatives that Emilio presented, as well as one other one about creating, would be the next slide of, we don't need to go there yet, but about creating a rent stabilization group. If the committee could weigh in on maybe a prioritization to that, because we definitely agree that this needs to be studied and brought back. I know Emilio indicated he wanted to, was proposing to come back in April or May with the engagement of cause and the continued conversations, but these were some of the original alternatives that Emilio researched from other cities. So if the council has any priority within these, that would be helpful for the workload.
Mayor, from your comments, I know that you were totally against it. So anything here
Yes.
that would interest you?
Yes, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, Mr. Chair, I really thank you for sharing your own experience. I can't imagine what that's like to go through. But you're an example of success, and you're an example of what happens when, number one, we invest in education, and number two, we invest in wage and job development. My first priority would be wage and job development. And the city manager and I and others in the city have been working on that. That needs to be accelerated, wage and job development. So that's number one. Number two would be career development. Number three would be affordable housing. And I think when it comes to tools for tenant rights, I would like to see, Mr. Chair, maybe four, that becomes a part of the Safe Homes, Safe Families program, that we're getting out more information. There are nonprofits that, like the Rural Assistance League and others that let tenants know about their rights, as well as legal assistance. But I think it should be incorporated into the Safe Homes, Safe Families program. I don't know to what extent that it is. And then finally, tenant rights, legal assistance. That I know is already being provided, but maybe that goes hand in hand with both of these, with the Safe Homes, Safe Families program. But I'd like to start with, really the optimism of wage and job development. And I know that, especially like right now during the pandemic, this is when individuals, and I understand people have to pay their bills. So this is the time that I think people are going to be most hard pressed for money on the one hand. So you're right, Mr. Chair, about trying to figure out to avoid any kind of real housing crisis of any kind. But I think that this is the time that we're more intently focused on wage and job development and career development, those first two, because ultimately the future of our city, of the children of this city, is going to come down to the middle class dream and what it's going to take for that attainment. So my priorities would be wage and job development, career development, affordable housing, tenant rights, and then tenant rights legal assistance.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. For me right now, I just feel that, everything, like I said, should be kind of be brought to the table. If there is a preference to what the mayor said, that's fine. But just, at the same time, we could be shown, some pros and cons to any form of rent control and what that might look like, simply because I know that this is going to be a long, back and forth, not only between groups and organizations, but also between not only committee members, but as well as council members. So just kind of like, at the same time offhand, just kind of have, what everything would end up looking like. I know some of the aspects that were brought up, some of the do's and don'ts, some of the things that you can and can't do right off the bat. So that way, that kind of, stabilizes, see where, things can possibly go or where they can't go. And as always, some of these alternatives are also things that, we should be working on. So if that kind of makes any sense at all.
It made a lot of sense to me, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Assistant City Manager Golden, does that kind of give enough detail or kind of give staff enough
Yes,
of a recommendation?
that is helpful. And as Emilio had in his presentation, some of the limitations on rent control, but we can definitely bring an item back specific to that request that you have too on the pros and cons, and have further discussions at committee before we formulate obviously any policies to bring forward. We'll be back here to check in.
No, and of course, and as always, kind of come back with any sort of options to see where we're looking at, or even some of things that that may come up along the way that that could possibly be another option. Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is the city manager. Can I make a quick request of cause and the community members who called in? Several people stated that in recent months they received rent increases. I'd like to request if we can get through cause the list of landlords who did that during the pandemic.
I muted myself. Oh, sorry about that. So is that good enough? We don't need to take any sort of vote, correct?
That is correct. You don't need a vote, and it sounds like you're in agreement with studying all of them, and which would be inclusive of the two final items on slide 12. Michelle, if you can just pull that up quickly. That this is part of the study that we should do of looking at this rent stabilization program as well as continuing engagement with cause.
Right.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Next, we do have for our second report for this afternoon, early evening, is from the Community Development Department, and it's the Coastal Zoning Ordinance Amendment, and it's on the beachfront residential subzone. And that'll be presented by
Isidro will be presenting. We're pulling up the PowerPoint now.
By Mr. Isidro Figueroa. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Staff is here to present on the FEMA firm regulations and local coastal program implications to sea level rise and the climate action plan. So I'll just briefly go over the overview of the presentation. We'll have an executive summary of FEMA and firm rate map regulations. We'll have a local coastal program policies to address sea level rise, introduce the coastal planning areas and adaptation strategies, discuss FEMA firm regulations applications to the adaptation strategies, brief overview of the climate action plan, and review key policy questions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. While they work that out, so there'll be two key policy questions.
Isidro, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure we're on track. She did advance. You just have 2 slides per.
Yes, right there. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
That's fine. There are 2 questions. Does the committee recommend adding a screening requirement to understories, which is the exposed space at the bottom of the dwellings, for residential properties within the beachfront subzone? And to what extent does the committee support the development of the sea level rise adaptation policies within the LCP that address near-term sea level rise impacts rather than adaptation planning for the year 2100? This incremental sea level rise adaptation approach is referred to as a hybrid approach. And a little bit about the background on the FEMA effort. It's been ongoing since the early 2000s. There was a specific effort in 2011 for the Ventura County coastline, referred to the California Coastal Analysis and Mapping Project, an open Pacific coast study. The process started with outreach community officials in the county, followed by discovery and inclusion of additional stakeholders, coastal analysis, mapping, preliminary firms, and then post-preliminary processing. The CCAMP OPC process culminated in August of this year. FEMA notified local jurisdictions that the revised firm and accompanying flood insurance study for the county, which includes obviously the city, were considered final, and the updated firm becomes effective January of 2021. The next slide just gives you an overview of the FEMA, the new FEMA firm maps along the city's coastline. Next slide, please. In regards to the FEMA firm regulation update, FEMA has been moving forward, like I said, since the early 2000s. FEMA provides communities with updated firms and flood insurance studies that focus on the probability and location of floods, as well as a calculated 1% annual chance flood elevation. These methods more accurately assess coastal risks associated with wave setup, wave run-up, and overtopping and dune bust erosion. In regards to the new FEMA, Michelle, if you can go to the, which would be page 37, slides 7 and 8. I'll continue going on, but the implications for construction for anything that started prior to January of 2021, the firm effective date shall comply with FEMA regulations unless significant construction has taken place. All construction started after January 2021 should comply with updated FEMA regulations. Significant construction has been defined within a memo that was sent to property owners within 2 weeks of the city being notified. And we are also notifying all current permits of the new regulations. Next page. In terms of the implication of the new FEMA firm regulations, that is expected to increase the base flood elevation to between 7 to 8 feet. All new construction and development must comply with that. Additionally, FEMA is going away with the datum point that was previously used to measure height. It is referred to as NGVD 29. It's a vertical datum that is used to base height. The city will do the implications to the city is that our coastal zoning ordinance refers to NGVD 29. So all we're doing is going to update our coastal zone to replace that datum point with what FEMA will be using, which is NAVD 88. The easiest way to explain it is if, for example, if all of our documents were using meter as a base unit for length, and now FEMA is using feet, all we're doing is just making that change. So that will be coming forward to the Planning Commission and City Council at a future date. And then slide 10, that's the understory that you'll see there. And you also see breakaway walls. So this is what the potential could be with the raised floor base elevation. And so our question to the committee is if the committee recommends adding screening to the understory. Next slide, please. Now we'll be talking about the LCP update and the applications to sea level rise. Just a little bit of a background. The city is currently undertaking a comprehensive update to the city's LCP, which was certified back in 1986. Part of the LCP process is to provide policies addressing sea level rise, consistent with the California Commission's sea level policy guidance. Staff has previously held public outreach meetings to address vulnerability assessment and adaptation strategies back in August of 2017 and March of 2018. If you can go to slides 13 and 14, please. In terms of FEMA, in comparison to sea level rise, FEMA firm identifies at-risk areas from floods associated with storms on current sea levels. It does not include adjustments to predicted water levels to account for sea level rise. Sea level rise is an increasing level of the world's oceans due to the effects of global warming. Sea level rise is anticipated to be equal to or additive to the FEMA firm elevation requirements. The vulnerability assessment and adaptation strategies identified by planning areas. There are 4 in the coastal zone for the city. Planning area 1 is the McGrath Mandalay area. Planning area number 2 is the Oxnard Shores area. Planning area number 3 is the Channel Islands Harbor, and planning area number 4 is Ormond Beach. Each planning area has geography and land uses that require a different mix of adaptations. We should be at slides 15 and 16 now. So next page, please. In slide number 15, we just wanted to give you a perspective of the projections for sea level rise in the city. In 2030, it's projected to be anywhere between 2.3 inches to 8 inches, 2060, 7 inches to 7.4 inches up to 25 inches. And in 2100, 17 inches up to 58 inches. The following slide, which is 16, that kind of gives you a visualization or visual of the projected sea level rise increase for the city in the coast, specific to Oxnard Shores. Next slide, please. There were 4 adaptation strategies identified in the vulnerability assessment: accommodation, which is to modify existing development or design new developments; green protect, which are dunes and wetlands and natural barriers; hard protect, armoring with rocks, seawalls, and so forth; all hard infrastructure; managed retreat, which is to relocate or remove existing development. The next slide, which gives you a visual of what accommodation is. As you can see, you have homes built on stilts, kind of reminiscent of what is in the East Coast. You have water pumps that would have to pump up water. Next slide, please. Green protect, dunes, wetlands, kind of similar to what we're trying to do at Ormond Beach with the Ormond Beach Restoration and Access Plan. The bottom slide is hard protect, so your typical revetments and seawalls. Next slide, please. If you give me 1 second, please. Hopefully this improves the presentation. We have, so the next slide would be managed retreat. And essentially what managed retreat is you're relocating development. The next slide shows the 4 planning areas in the city. Next slide, please. So within planning area 1, the recommended strategy is managed retreat, which would remove the Mandalay power plant, the Edison peaker, which has a 25-year permit limit, relocate facilities within McGrath State Beach to higher ground. For planning area number 2, which is Oxnard Shores, it has all 4: green protect, accommodation, hard protect, and managed retreat. With green protect, you're seeing dunes from 5th Street south, protecting residential structures along the beachfront. Make modifications to stormwater drainage pump systems. Hard protect to build seawall from 5th Street south. And managed retreat, which would basically mean remove development. Next slide, please. For planning area number 3, Channel Islands, you have green protect, accommodation, hard protect, and managed retreat. Green protect would be dune construction along Hollywood Beach shoreline, seawalls and revetments on Channel Islands Boulevard to Channel Islands Harbor entrance, removal of development in the Channel Islands Harbor, and accommodation by elevating the Channel Islands Harbor. For planning area number 4, which is Ormond Beach, green protect, which essentially is the implementation of the Ormond Beach Restoration and Access Plan, and managed retreat, the removal of the Ormond Beach Generating Station, removal of Halico Superfund site, and the Oxnard Water Treatment Facility. Next slide, please. When staff presented these adaptation strategies to the public, it wasn't well received. The majority of the participants who were property owners along Ormond Beach, Oxnard Shores, were discouraged. They felt that the dunes would impede on their views and bring economic hardships to their investments. They also voiced concern about the cost of the studies and implementation of the adaptation strategies, which was the same sentiment for accommodation, managed retreat, and armoring strategies. Now, staff believes that a better approach would be a hybrid option. Essentially, the hybrid option is an adaptation approach that uses strategies from multiple categories as a flexible pathway to address sea level rise for balancing economic, environmental, and safety goals over time. One example is a trigger by event. So you have, let's just say, for example, you have a storm. It damages property. The first event will allow the property owner to rebuild. If a similar event occurs with similar consequences, then on the second event, the property owner would have to relocate. It would also trigger in previously mentioned adaptation strategies, and or a combination of adaptation strategies could also be triggered by an event as well. Next slide, please. So the policy question here for the committee is, to what extent does the committee support the development of sea level rise adaptation strategies within the LCP that address near-term sea level rise impacts rather than adaptation planning for the year 2100, with the preferable approach being a hybrid? The climate action plan update, quick overview. Next slide, please. The CAP will address hazards associated with FEMA and sea level rise and other hazards associated with climate change, such as an increasing number of extreme heat days. The CAP will also contain strategies that the city can put into place to increase resilience to flood hazards, both FEMA and identify flood hazards and sea level rise related flood and erosion hazards. The CAP will rely on the LCP derived adaptation strategies to improve community sustainability and resiliency. And the adaptation strategies will impact both the LCP and CAP policy documents. So again, the key policy questions for this committee, slide number 33, please. And does the committee recommend adding screening to the understory? FEMA firm regulations require that the base floor elevation increase between 7 to 8 feet. The California Residential Code directs the habitable structure development to be placed 2 feet above the base floor elevation. FEMA firm and California Residential Code regulations combined will create a significant understory, exposing pilings or lightly screened breakaway walls. So that the committee recommends staff to study and present screening of understories or leave understories untreated. And then the next question, should staff continue with the sea level rise adaptation strategies or the hybrid alternative? The hybrid approach allows the city to maintain local control over adaptation decisions. For the example that I gave previously, the phased adaptation of a trigger event. It also allows the city to have an incremental approach to match the unique characteristics of the city, consider the associated local costs and benefits, and make local officials the determinants as to what is an acceptable level of risk best interest for the city. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, staff will bring forward a coastal zone text amendment to make amendments to the datum points. So converting the NGVD 29 to NAVD 88. The proposed roadmap for that would be to conduct community engagement, city staff, coastal commission engagement, go before the planning commission for review recommendation, come back to the city council for review and a decision, and then move forward with the coastal commission review and certification process. Next slide, please. So the two key policy questions to the committee are: one, does the committee recommend adding a screening requirement to understories, which is the exposed bottom of the dwellings for residential properties within the beachfront subzone? And two, to what extent does the committee support the development of sea level rise adaptation policies within the LCP that address near-term sea level rise impacts rather than adaptation planning for the year 2100, which again, staff believes a hybrid approach is more adequate. Next slide, please. The staff recommends the following to the committee: receive summary reports on the new FEMA and firm regulation implementation and implications for development along the coast, and summary of the LCP sea level rise management adaptation strategies. To provide input on sea level rise management adaptation strategies and hybrid adaptation approaches, provide feedback on the required datum change to the Oxnard City Code based on the new FEMA firm regulations and potential screening requirements to properties which have a beachfront zoning designation as stipulated by the new FEMA firm regulations. That concludes staff's presentation, and staff's available for any questions.
Hey, thank you very much for the presentation. We do have one speaker, and that would be Walter Hagedorn.
Hi, Walter. You have 3 minutes to address the committee. Please begin.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Walter Hagedorn. I'm chairman of the Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council. Members of the committee, the Community Development Department is asking this committee to approve the new FEMA regulations and to provide guidance for the LCP update concerning adaptation strategies. Since Oxnard Shores is the only beachfront residential community in Oxnard affected by FEMA and the primary one affected by the adaptation strategies associated with sea level rise, the Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council has been studying these issues and would like to offer the following suggestions. First, the FEMA regulations and the LCP sea level rise issue should be considered separately. The FEMA regulations must be passed soon to meet requirements important to the city, and the issues the Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council had with the implementation of the new standards have been resolved. It was found that the height limits in the RBF zone did not need to be altered, and other issues with the code were resolved. The Community Development Department is also asking the committee to provide guidance concerning the LCP sea level rise planning. The staff report states that regulations for development must include sea level rise that is, quote, anticipated to be equal to or additive to FEMA elevation requirements. Since FEMA regulations only include wave run-up for a 1 in 100-year wave event that is determined solely by the contour of the shoreline and only affects homes within 100 feet of the shoreline would have to move substantially for the effect to be additive. This is important to Oxnard Shores since the resulting elevation of the two, which could be as much as 13 feet. There needs to be more study and community involvement before a new policy direction concerning the additive effects of sea level rise and the FEMA changes is determined or consideration of adaptation strategies. The department has also recommended a hybrid adaptation approach to the LCP sea level rise issue that give the city flexibility in balancing different goals. We believe that this is a good direction since it could also address some of Oxnard Shores' specific concerns. The Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council supports the Community Development Department's recommendations to adopt the FEMA regulations as well as the hybrid adaptation approach in dealing with the LCP and sea level rise issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor Flynn, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair and members of the staff, this is a lengthy, very, I would say, very complex issue on a variety of fronts. And I would like for Isidro, who does a great job, he's a little bit too smart for his own good, however. And I would like for Isidro to go over very quickly what it is exactly, because that he wants the committee to recommend on a policy sense, because a lot of it is anticipating what the HEDC is going to do. So I did get this thing about the hybrid approach, about the screening and that kind of thing, but it seems a little bit convoluted. So I'd like it kind of made very clear to this committee what exactly this committee has to give feedback on. Isidro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sure, I'll be more than happy to explain. So on one end, we're obviously just informing the council, or the committee, I'm sorry, that we will be bringing forward a coastal zone text amendment to update the datum points for measuring height, just to be consistent internally with our city documents that have already done so. or are in the process of doing so, and with FEMA. So that's more the technical aspect. That's pretty straightforward. On the sea level rise adaptation strategies, what we're asking is we've identified sea level rise adaptation strategies that are based on the state sea level rise guidance. However, based on the reaction and comments of the public during the public workshops, based on what we have seen from other jurisdictions with their attempt to certify their LCP during the with the Coastal Commission and through their own public process, we feel that a hybrid approach is worth exploring. Obviously, whether we go that route or not will ultimately be up to the City Council when all options are presented. But at this particular point, what we're asking is, does this committee see staff developing a hybrid approach to present to ultimately the City Council, Planning Commission, and Committee to consider as our response to addressing sea level rise in regards to the state's coastal sea level rise guidance?
Okay, thank you very much, Isidro. Could you please go to the slide that addresses number 1? Because I saw like this prototype on the screening for the bottom level.
So that would be towards the beginning, and it would be slide. Give me 1 second here. Michelle,
Okay,
towards the beginning.
Yeah, the understory right there.
Yeah, slide 10.
Right there.
Okay, so I really can't, I mean, I looked at this on the staff report a little bit. Let's just, if you could just talk or speak quickly to the understory and the added screening to the understory, maybe just talk about that a little bit, the pros, the cons, et cetera, because that's one of the very things we're being asked in number 1.
Right, so, excuse me. So aesthetically pleasing, as you can see, it's not that pleasing to see. So in terms of an aesthetic, one way to treat this problem, potential problem, would be with some architectural guidelines to screen it. The other one is safety. An understory could be a hiding place for children. And with also the homeless encampments, it could also be a situation where you'll have encampments, or it's just an unsafe place where you could potentially have some unlawful acts being taking place. So that's the reason why we feel that it might be worth studying, implementing, or coming up with some architectural guidelines to treat this condition if it does occur.
So I'm hearing from you aesthetics,
public
safety, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about, in the RBF and the coastal zone, it doesn't matter what the material is, it doesn't last very long because of weathering and everything else, right? And so what kind of structure are we talking about there on that understory? What do we talk about the material? Or, I mean, I don't want to get into the specifics about it, but I'm just I'm kind of curious about that.
Mr. Mayor, this is Scott Kolbitz, if I could chime in here.
Okay.
So we haven't identified any materials at this point in time, partially because we wanted to engage with the HGDC to explore this concept. Essentially, what is before you in this image, one is a house that's on pilings with no screening. That's essentially the right side of the image. And then there's an example of what screening might look like in a pretty basic format. The materials, they could be materials that would effectively match the rest of the home. The key for FEMA is that it needs to be able to break away if water starts running up, and it needs to be able to go clear underneath the structure. There aren't any guidelines from FEMA in terms of things that we can't have. So if the council, if the HEDC and the council so direct for certain details to be matching the rest of the structure, that can be done. If we're looking for windows and walls and windows and doors to be installed, those sort of things can be explored as well. It really is an open-ended question, though, as we're looking at what our community might turn out to look like as FEMA guidelines are implemented. Do we really want something that, the short question is, do we want something that is pushing us towards exposed piles, or are we looking for something that's giving us a faux appearance of a structure on the ground floor?
I see. So I'll just say to the chairman and to the staff that, there's no question from a safety perspective and an aesthetics perspective that I would desire to have something, some adding, I don't know if it's screening or what it would be to the understory for all the reasons stated. If one is in a more remote area, perhaps, this isn't as much of an issue, maybe, but we're in a very densely populated area, and I'm just thinking about the RBF zone and/or area, and I'm just thinking, there's just so many people, with coastal access issues and things like that. There's just so many issues. There's so many children going to the beach and things of this nature. I mean, we certainly, I think that safety takes precedent over aesthetics, even though aesthetics is very important. So I'd like to see something there, whatever that is. I don't know what that would be, but that does concern me because when whether sea level rise is on the uptake to the extent here on the California coast, as it is, it's not as in other areas, in the southern part of the United States and things of that nature. That, but there are instances where maybe over time, whatever materials are used, I think is very important because it could cause more of a safety issue, more of an aesthetics issue. So that's what concerns me. That's kind of a trade-off. But I see the more immediate thing is safety can be taken care of and aesthetics. But in the long term, my concern is what is going to maintain those first two and also deal with weathering and water, saltwater erosion and, just the weather at the beach, which is brutal on cars, on any materials of any kind. So I would think that, we'd want to explore best practices about what in fact can and should those structures be. Could we go please to the sea level rise, SLR next, please? Can we go back to that recommendation, the hybrid, where it talks about that?
Is there a specific slide?
Yeah, it's the same slide that we just had on, I think it was the same slide we had on, hybrid approach. Back 2 slides, I think. 1, 2, there it goes. All right. So number 2, continue with SLR adaptation strategies or hybrid. City is seeking to maintain local control over adoption decisions, phased adoption, trigger, event-based, incremental approach, unique to the city, consider the associated local costs and benefits, local officials to, is that the hybrid?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, those are the reasons why we feel the hybrid approach is more fruitful for the city than just looking at what the state has vision. And again, the state with its good intention has looked at the state as a whole and not really given local jurisdictions the ability to kind of look and see what's unique about their geography, the political and community structure, and also, in terms of finances, right? Their they're not really thinking about what our budgetary constraints or situation are. And so this hybrid approach is an ability for the city to address sea level rise, but do it in such a way where it's responsible for the city and its citizens.
Okay.
And that's why we feel that, this is maybe a better approach.
Well, I like, Mr. Chair, I like the words incremental. I like the words cost and benefits. I like the words local. So there's really nothing about this hybrid approach that is in any way unappealing or alarming to me. I take the speaker, Mr. Hagedorn, his comments talking about working with the community. I think that's important also. Although when we're talking Isidro, about the structures that we're talking about, newer structures, aren't we? When we're talking about all of this, about the hybrid approach, about, well, I mean, both the understory and the adoption strategies. I mean,
yeah. Here's the nuance. The sea level rise adaptation strategy are not just developed to protect property. They're also developed to maintain and enhance public access to the beach.
Okay.
So there has to be a common ground where we are able to protect private property and public facilities, but at the same time, make sure that we ensure public access to the beach, to the entire community and region. And so that's the balancing act that we have to kind of juggle with.
I see. Well, I'm thinking about, the organization Beacon, and yes. I'm thinking about all the hard work that Beacon put into Surfers Point, where I used to spend my youth, and where I'm going to resume my surfing career here very shortly. And I think about all the hard work that they put into Surfers Point, and part of it had to do too with taking down the dam, and then once the dam was taken down, it would replenish the beachhead, and so they took the more natural approach, to I'm not a specialist on this, Mr. Chair, but I don't know if a person can use natural means to armor, but it's not armoring the beach and or the coastal areas. I'm a big advocate of that, and I haven't studied it that thoroughly, but I'm thinking Beacon spent a couple years, and Brian Brennan in particular, former city councilman of Ventura and aide to Steve Bennett. He spent, and that Beacon group spent so much time on Surfers Point, and I know it was related to the dam, but it seemed like that plan, and I don't know where that plan is, because I don't know where the taking down of the dam is. I think it has a lot to do with the money, but if we can approach it that way, I'm the hybrid approach. I'd like to be specific, and I like Mr. Hagedorn's suggestion about working with the community. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, really quickly, Beacon is a member of our technical advisory committee for the LCP. So we obviously are involved with Beacon in terms of our sea level rise policies and adaptation strategies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with the mayor. I agree with Mr. Hagedorn. I am perfectly fine with the hybrid approach. I feel that, this is a step in the right direction. And then the actual term was, what was it for the covering or?
The understory?
The understory, yeah, I am for the, what was it?
The architecture, yeah, to look at architectural treatment of the understory.
Yeah. I am okay with that as well. So that being the case, Mayor, do you have a motion?
I move, Mr. Chair, that in the two questions that we've been asked as members of this committee, that we move to add screening to the understory that we recommend, and in our interactions with HEDC. And number two, that we adopt the hybrid approach that's recommended by staff, including the speaker, Mr. Hagedom, about a robust community input process. That's my motion.
Okay. Second, Mayor.
Member Flynn,
Aye.
Chair Madrigal,
Aye.
and Busua isn't with us anymore, right?
Right.
Okay. All right, then it's passes 2-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Real quickly, before we continue, Assistant City Manager Ms. Golden, do we continue with report 3 and 4?
It's really at the pleasure of the committee. They are just receiving files, so it is up to your time commitments if you would like to continue those items to the next date.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mayor.
Mr. Chair, I do have some pressing time constraints, and I unfortunately I did not attend this agenda planning meeting, as Ms. Golden had alluded to earlier. And because they're just receiving file, I know it said that they're supposed to be quick, but I just know from example, I mean, this could go to 7:30, 8 o'clock. So I would recommend we just, because they are receiving file, and the most important issues we just dealt with, number 1 and number 2, if we could, at the chair's pleasure, postpone this to the next meeting.
Okay. Would that be fine if we postpone it to the next meeting?
Yes, you can definitely do that. We'll bring that back at your first meeting in January.
Okay, sounds good then. Report 3 and 4 will be postponed to our January meeting. Continuing then to item E, items on future agenda. Mayor.
I have no items. I'm really happy that I know that this staff brought the Safe Homes, Safe Families back to the committee. I wasn't able to attend that committee meeting. It's one of the only ones I've missed. And then I'm really happy that these two very I'll just say, they're very pressing issues. What was just presented to us, Mr. Chair, and the other issue, I'm glad that we were able to weigh in on that, and that's the job of the committee to do exactly that. And I hope that our recommendations are accepted by the City Council. And also, Mr. Chair, if just as a conclusion, I just want to thank you for your leadership on this committee. You've done an excellent job as chair, and as I said to Councilman Perello earlier in the Public Works Committee, it's great that individual council members have a chance to chair committees, and they see just how challenging at times it can be to run meetings, but it gives everybody a lot of experience. But it's been a real pleasure working with you, not only as a city council member, but as the chairman of this committee. It's been a lot of fun. I'm really going to miss it. I'll miss working with you. Hopefully we'll work together in some other capacity, and I also want to thank the staff because this has been a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, for the kind words, and it's been a pleasure working with you on this committee. With that being said, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.